Welcome to CityWorks, a co-production of the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies and CUNY TV. I'm Laura Flanders. Every week here on CityWorks, we explore the challenges and lived experiences of working people on the job, at home, and in our communities. On today's program, the United Auto Workers strike, an historic victory. After a 6-week walkout, the UAW clinched new deals from the 3 largest American auto companies, reinstating benefits that had been previously lost and securing new gains, including wage increases across the board. The UAW's success is largely attributed to a new union president, Shawn Fain, and a fresh stand-up strike strategy in which workers walked off the job at more locations each week in response to a lack of progress at the bargaining table. Labor historians have called this victory transformative, a turning point for UAW members after years of concessions and scandals, including corruption among past union leaders. But it doesn't stop there. Union leaders across the country say that the UAW's new contract agreements are a victory not just for auto workers, but for organized labor writ large. UAW's Shawn Fain has called this a turning point in the class war has been raging in this country for the past 40 years. His words, not mine. Joining us today to discuss the strike, the momentous new labor contracts, and what they mean for organized labor going forward is Brian Schneck, one of those who fought for reform inside the UAW. He's president of UAW Local 259, which represents 1,500 repair technicians at dealerships on Long Island and across the tri-state area. And joining us from Detroit is Jane Slaughter, co-founder of Labor Notes, where she's covered the auto industry since 1979, before which apparently she was briefly an auto worker herself. She's the author or co-author of many books, including Secrets of a Successful Organizer. Well, welcome both of you, and I have to say, there is no kind of qualms about this. This was a successful strike. What are you most excited about, Brian?
After many long years, the UAW is back in the fight. We're back.
And what about you, Jane? When you look at this strike, what stands out about the significance of what's been won here?
I agree with Brian. The change in the members' attitude toward their own union is just amazing. 4 years ago, they had a strike at General Motors. I went out to the picket lines all the time. People would just stand there glumly waiting for their international rep to come tell them about their strike benefits. This time, you could feel the pride. People are proud to be auto workers, proud to be UAW members. They love Shawn Fain. They were just love the transparency of the union and the fact that the union had a new strategy that seemed to be rocking the companies back on their heels. So I expect big changes in the members' involvement in their own union.
Well, if they like the feeling now, wait till the benefits kick in that they won in this deal. Brian, you want to sort of itemize the key points of what's been won here?
We had far too many tier 2 or less workers in our membership working for the big 3, with substandard wages, lack of benefits. All of these concessions were granted to the big 3 and the bankruptcies of 2008, 2009. And regrettably, the UAW did not fight in 2011 or 15 or 19 to win those concessions back.
Well, let's just lay out why that's so significant. Jane, coming to you, I mean, that question of tiers. People think about unions. I think we're all in this together. In those agreements, the members were not all in it together. There were separations driven into the workforce.
Yes. In 2007, they literally cut the wages of new hires in half and took away their pensions or their future pensions and their retiree health care. So you had these 2 very different tiers, people doing the same work, working next to each other on the assembly line. This is what was repeated to me over and over by the workers on the line, is what they were out to do is end the system of tiers and the abuse of so-called temporaries who would work at an even lower wage for years at a time with very few rights.
There is a chapter of this story that pertains to how the new leadership of Shawn Fain got elected. Jane, talk about that, because there's differences in how this guy emerged from how the previous regime had been selected.
Well, all throughout the UAW's history, the top leaders were elected at conventions. The conventions were quite easy for the incumbents to control. And if you got along and did whatever the top people said, then you might rise higher up in the union. And many people in the locals who had ambitions saw the union as just a career ladder. Right. Hopefully I can get out of this plant and I can go on the regional staff or the international staff and have a cushier job and a higher paying job. And so you kissed ass in order to try to get chosen for those jobs. And the same thing filtered down to the convention system, very easy to control, and they became sort of love fests with people standing up at the convention and talking about how much they love their regional director. I'm not exaggerating this. It was really nauseating to see.
So how did we get Shawn Fain?
So this caucus that had formed in 2019, UAWD, said, we have an idea. We think the way to get the corruption out of the union is to give members control over who their leaders are. Give us the right to vote on our top officers. So they held a referendum. Do you want the right to vote? Not surprisingly, won by a big majority. And then they held the first election, and Shawn Fain ran for president with a slate, not by himself. There were 7 people. They won all their 7 slots that they won. They now have a majority on the executive board. So that's what enabled this big change to happen.
And what made Fain's agenda different, Jane?
Oh, just about everything. He wanted to actually fight the companies. He wanted to win back what the members had won over all these years. The old administration was fine with letting those concessions stay in place. I remember in 2015, the members at Chrysler actually voted down a tentative agreement because it kept the tiers in place so badly. And there was a meeting, and the president of the union said, quote unquote, ending 2-tier is bull. You know, this is never going to happen. Well, the new guys, their slogan when they ran for office was no corruption, no concessions, no tiers. And that's what they set out to do, was get rid of the tiers.
So you have a fresh leader and you have some new strategy. What was different about the stand-up strike strategy, Brian?
Well, the approach that the UAW had years ago in bargaining with the big 3 was they would pick a target. They would pick which company do we think that we could get the most favorable deal with, and then we would go to the other 2 to try to get the same, do a pattern bargain. So the companies knew, okay, this is ready, hit play, this is what's going to happen, right? Well, that didn't happen this time. What happened this time was we were bargaining against the big 3. We weren't bargaining just against Ford Motor Company or Stellantis or GM. It was the big 3 in totality, and we took out assembly plants of each of the manufacturers initially. And then it got escalated. The reasons why it escalated was because of the company's behavior at the bargaining table. If you were going to start being fair and reasonable, well, you got rewarded. We didn't shut down any of your additional operations. If you were being a bastard, well, it was responded to, where they shut down the parts distribution centers for Stellantis and also General Motors. You know, and then it escalated beyond that.
And the unpredictability of it made all the difference, it seems to me. The wins, what has been won here and what's next for this movement? You've got a lot of factories out there making cars, Teslas and others that aren't unionized.
Huge gains in money. What they did not win was to get rid of the tiers on benefits. The lower people still don't have a pension, although they got a huge boost to 401k. They still don't have retiree health care. So that's next. Shawn Fain promises that's next. And he says if we can't get it from the companies, we'll get it from the government. Maybe we'll need to be lowering the age of Medicare. Huge, huge goal. To do that, he says, we need to be much stronger within the auto industry, which means organizing all these non-union plants, all the German-owned, Japanese-owned, Korean-owned plants that are mostly in the South. And their phones are ringing off the hook. They are getting hundreds of calls a day. People are signing up online. they want to be organized in these plants. So,
all right, we're going to hear what happens next right after this break. We'll be back with Jane Slaughter and Brian Schneck right after this break.
The CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies is the 25th and newest school under the CUNY umbrella. Dedicated to public service and social justice, the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies offers undergraduate and graduate degrees in the areas of labor studies and urban studies, and certificate programs in labor relations, public administration and public policy, healthcare policy and administration, and community leadership. We pride ourselves on being an institution that brings together activists and academics. Find out more at slu.cuny.edu.
We're back. I'm here talking with Brian Schneck of Local 259 from the UAW and Jane Slaughter of Labor Notes joining us from Detroit. Brian, before the break, Jane talked about the financial gains that have been won in this tremendous victory for the UAW after their strike of the last few weeks. What, in terms of money, are members looking at?
Well, the money that the members are going to get in their wages is upfront 11%, but over the life of the agreement, it's 25%. But with anticipated inflation, because they got the COLA adjustment, it should compound over 30. But what's exciting
So wait, give us dollars and cents. What does that mean people will be earning?
Well, you have members right now making $33 an hour. They're going to be making $42 an hour in 4.5 years from now. That's significant. And there's no other way to describe that. Plus, you have Tier 2 workers that are going to finally get economic justice, and they're going to be paid just like incumbent UAW members that hired in before 2007. Equal pay for equal work.
And from what you're hearing, Jane, you were saying right before the break, a whole lot of people who aren't members of unions right now are looking at this agreement and saying, hey, what about me?
yes.
What else can you tell us about that?
Well, one thing is the very lowest paid workers, somebody who's making $18 an hour, 17 now, will immediately jump to 35. And as Brian said, within a few years to 42. So this is life-changing to have your pay doubled overnight. And the workers in the non-union factories are seeing that, and they're saying, we want the same thing. Some of the companies, as Brian said, are already jumping in to try to forestall a union drive by giving some raises. So it's going to be up to the union to say, we can get you even more, and not only the money, but also the security, the solidarity of having a union.
Now, the argument of the companies has been for decades, but certainly in the last period we've been talking about, and again in relation to this contract, they said this will so cut into our profits that we will go out of business. We will be in trouble. We'll have to make layoffs. What's the truth as far as you understand? Are you worried?
I'm not worried. They're making billions upon billions of dollars, and they're going to continue to make billions upon billions. When you look at their economic model, right, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I can figure this out. They pay very little in local, state, and federal taxes, right? They're getting a free ride. They're getting shoveled billions and billions of dollars right now, for this EV build out, all right? They've never had it so good. They've never had it so good. You have to invest in your people. The labor force of any company on the face of the earth is their most important asset. If you want your company to do well and flourish, you got to take care of your people. Enough of the profits before people.
Now, they said after the financial crash, the reason those bad deals were cut was because they said otherwise we'll be doing layoffs. Do you see anything, Jane, that leads you to think that there will be any kind of reprisal on the part of the owners for this deal?
It doesn't look that way because they have to do this EV transition. This is necessary for their survival. They're going to have to start building electric cars. There's disagreement over whether that means fewer jobs or more jobs. Obviously, the companies are going to try to do it with fewer jobs. But the UAW won lots of protections there. First of all, they brought to when any new EV plants would come under the master agreement, almost all of them automatically, so that they're full members of the union, making the full pay if you're a person that transfers into one of those plants. And they also won the right to strike over the company's product decisions, investment decisions, threatened plant closings. So if the companies threaten to shut down, they can bring the whole weight of the union against that.
And for people who haven't been following, that also had been signed away in those agreements that we've talked about years ago. Brian, coming to you, we're all white people having this conversation. We hear this trope about the white working class. That's not who I saw on the picket lines. That's not who I saw standing out there striking in Detroit or at the other auto plants. How would you describe the workforce these days and the UAW of today in terms of culture, diversity, race, gender?
Well, the UAW has long had a relationship with the social movement in this country, the civil rights movement during the 60s and even now. So we fight for economic and social justice. And I'm proud of the fact that we have a very diverse membership. We have a lot of women that are within our ranks. We have a lot of women leaders in our locals, and now it's reflected in our international executive board. You know, the UAW is a very diverse labor organization, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm glad that you raised that, because we are America. The people that you've seen on those picket lines, they're the ones that make this country work. They're the ones that pay the bills of this country. We contribute to the tax base. We're the ones that, you know, we patronize all these small businesses that are in or around the assembly plants and all these small towns across the country. When a plant goes down, it's a vacuum. It's just such a shock to a region, you know, within Ohio or whatnot. And that's going to change because of these contracts.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you now to talk a little bit about your own personal experience, both of you. You've both been involved in union organizing and union reporting on union organizing. You've both worked in auto plants. Jane, you surprised me by your story of working in the plants. What did you do, and what did you learn from that experience that you bring to what you do now?
Well, I put headliners into the roofs of Cadillacs. That was my first job. It was considered one of the nastiest jobs in the plant. I didn't know that because I'd never worked in a factory before. I thought, oh, this is just how things are. Come to find out later, everybody hated this job, so that's why they gave it to the new person. I think I learned that my fellow workers they're not the romanticized workers that some of our progressive friends might like them to be. They have all the flaws of everybody else. They have many other things going on in their lives besides their work and besides their union. The union is competing for their attention with a million other things. So yeah, I learned that my fellow auto workers, who continue to be my favorite people to be with and hang with and cover in the labor movement, they're people with a lot of complexity, but people, boy, can they rise to the occasion. That class consciousness is just right there, right under the surface. And although it was suppressed all those years when the union didn't want to fight, boy, is it coming out now.
What about you, Brian?
Well, again, it's very exciting to see this power that we have just unleashed, because it's just been sitting there and dormant for so long. But I'm fortunate. I learned my skill in high school, 11th and 12th grade. I took automotive mechanics. I went to work at a dealership right in my hometown, Valley Stream, Long Island. And we organized the union in my particular shop. And so the union, to me, has been everything. It's been a constant in my life. And it's just personally, it's opened me up to so many different experiences, so many different people, because I would have been stuck in my silo. I'd still be working in that particular shop, you know, if I didn't get involved in the union. You know, life you just don't know where it's going to take you, right? And never did I ever believe that I'd be in this capacity serving the men and women that I represent every day, you know, and it's incredible. So you just gotta give back every day. You gotta fight for the current, and you gotta fight for the future. You know, so it's just an incredible thing.
So what will you get up tomorrow and do in terms of union organizing? What's the next step, I guess I'm asking, for this movement after this transformative victory? What do you do with that new power? Any sense?
keep telling our story, keep encouraging others to join our ranks. I mean, it's exciting. During the strike, the big three, we were getting phone calls. You know, as Jane stated earlier, with the non-union automakers, we're getting calls from solar panel companies, labs that I don't even know what they do. But and we asked them, well, why us? They're like, because you guys fight. The UAW fights. We want to join a union that's willing to fight. And I've been doing this for 30 years. I was so proud to hear that, because I haven't heard that.
Jane, what about you? What's your sense of where this momentum goes next?
Well, I'm really looking forward to the organizing drives that we talked about, and Labor Notes covering those. Maybe I'll go down to Toyota in Kentucky or in my home state of West Virginia and talk to the workers there. I think that's going to be the thing that's going to say that this strike, the victory, was not just a flash in the pan. This really is one union showing how a union can change and make a huge difference. And it'll be life transforming for thousands and thousands of people.
I want to thank you both. I've got one question that's just lingering in my mind from the very first hours of the strike being declared. And it was a moment on the picket line in Detroit, I believe, where Congresswoman Ilhan Omar appeared in support of her constituents who were fighting. You also saw Rashida Tlaib, who represents an area with auto workers as well, showing up on picket lines. I mention these two because they have been in the spotlight as Congress responds to the Israel-Hamas conflict. And Rashida Tlaib has been the only congresswoman to be censured for her comments. She's Palestinian. How about that relationship? Can you talk about the significance of the relationship between politicians and those who brought this strike about? Jane, you want to touch on that?
Back in 2019, General Motors threatened or announced that they were closing a big important plant here in Detroit, one of the very few assembly plants remaining in Detroit. And people organized to protest this. The union didn't organize to protest it, I'm very sorry to say, but Rashida Tlaib was out there on the lines, leading the demonstration on the bullhorn, saying, GM, you owe us not to shut this plant down. Keep it open or we'll take it over. So she's been an advocate of workers, even when it was harder to do that, when the union was in other hands. My understanding is that now she has a very good relationship with Shawn Fain. I'm sure that the union has her back and will be all out there advocating for her to be reelected.
What do you think, Brian? Is it a reciprocal relationship with the politicians that backed you?
Well, it's for one thing that Shawn Fain said, that instead of elected officials organizing us, we need to organize them to work for us. And the two congressional representatives that you mentioned, they have very strong labor voting records. That matters to us, because too often I'm told, oh, we support you. Well, don't tell me, show me.
Right.
Don't tell me, show me. Okay, you voted for us, but what legislation are you going to fight for us? Yeah. And that's what we want to see. And for Rashida Tlaib to step out and advocate for auto workers in her community, those are the type of people that we want to see, fighting for us, and because that brings others into it.
And I bet President Biden got a few points from you too in his historic turn up on the picket line.
I was encouraged by that. Because the other guy, well, let's not talk about him.
That was a historic part of the strike too, Jane. We'd never seen it.
It didn't hurt. I don't think it was the main thing that turned the tide, although I did hear that the company executives were not happy about it.
So what do you want people to take away from this in terms of people out there maybe who think, well, I'm not a member, I'm not an auto worker, maybe I'm a gig worker, maybe I'm a, home worker. What do you want them to take away from this, Brian?
I want people to understand that they need to stand up and fight for themselves and their coworkers and their families and their communities, because people just feel that they cannot do that. So it's very encouraging. These big three contracts are going to be the cornerstone of the growth of the UAW. We only represent 40% of the auto sector in the manufacturing, right? Wait till we get to 60%. Wait till we get to 80. Then you'll see real growth in these collective bargaining agreements. And we'll have political power to move the legislation that we need.
And we'll be driving electric cars. Jane?
I would encourage anybody that doesn't have a union to try to form one, or if you already have one, to try to change it to make it better. This is one of the things Labor Notes does, is help people to transform their unions. We were standing by the UAWD all the time that they were doing that. And we're having a big conference next April in Chicago. We expect probably 4,500 people, because that's all the hotel will hold. And it'll be just full of people looking to learn how to fight. So if you look at labornotes.org, you can sign up for that.
Read all about it. Jane Slaughter, thank you so much, joining us from Detroit with Labor Notes. And Brian Schneck, Local 259, thank you so much for being here. That's it for CityWorks. If you have questions or comments, you can write to us at cityworks@slu.cuny.edu. For CityWorks, I'm Laura Flanders. Thanks for watching.